So, Lou, thank you so very much for saying yes to this. I really appreciate you being here today. I am very excited to be having this conversation with you.
And I'm glad to be having it with you.
So, let's start off with this image. 1996, Lou, this is your book.
Yes.
Um, Before we jump in, what made you write? I love this book. I really do. I think it's easy to read. It's easy to understand. It doesn't have anything in it that no person would not understand, or rather the opposite of that is anyone who has ever read even a newspaper will be able to understand this book and get a lot out of it.
I'm glad if they did. Yeah, your first question was what at that point in my life. I was 50 at the time. So midlife, was very interested in two things that really struck me. I had gone to social work school and I was interested in doing therapy, but I also got interested in a certain form of family therapy called Bowenian family systems therapy. And what it focused on was the family of origin, suggesting that if people went back in time and studied their family, not just the family tree, which is just births and deaths and marriages, but if they really studied the emotional, excuse me, the emotional patterns in their family, which includes people's tendency to be, let's say people had addictions in the family, or all the men were alcoholics on a certain side of the family, or people tend to get married in certain patterns, or children got conscripted into certain roles in families. That turned out to be nothing that happened in just one generation. It usually happened over a number of generations. So that was the field of study that I got very enamored with at that point in my life. The other thing that I was interested in because was fatherhood, which I was already a father of teenage daughters, two daughters, and I had to question some of my own responses over the years, times that I gotten angry with them, times that I had things that popped out of my mouth that I really felt were much more like my own father. And I really had to question that because I was a therapist for quite a few years by then. I had first gone and become a psychotherapist when I was about 30. So I had been many years in the field and my daughters were teenagers, and yet I had to question what some of these patterns of getting angry in situations and being short-tempered with all my training. So
Yeah.
those two things came together. The study of the family of origin um, and things about manhood and fatherhood that sort of came together with me. And that was the idea of coaching for fatherhood, because coaching
Right.
is an interesting word. It's a
Yeah.
word men often appreciate
All right.
because they often have someone in their life, if they were in team sports, or the whole notion of a coach was important, especially if men who might not have had a father that was very involved. The coach, even the coach that we watched on TV, the
Yeah.
coaches some of us had in Little League or other sports. So the word coach was a very male-friendly word. And the interesting thing that the Bowenian therapy, that family of origin therapy, also uses the word coaching as the way that we do therapy. Instead of where, in the old Freudian types of therapy, where the therapist was so important that everything was called the transference, which all the feelings would come back to the therapist, and the therapist would examine his or her feelings. This notion of coaching is saying the therapist should not be so central. They should be like a coach or a good coach on the sidelines. So the coach, if you watch a good soccer game or anything, The coach isn't in the middle of the field. The coach is standing on the sideline, giving you advice, giving you a hint or two, but you're on your own playing field. And the playing
Yeah.
field in this regard is really the family. Even when I work with couples and others, when somebody gets very involved in somebody else's family, I often say, wait a minute, whose playing field are we on?
Yeah.
So the idea of the book, coming back to that, was that maybe men who were friendly to the idea of coaching and are into the type of strategies that go on in sports would be interested in looking at their own family from that perspective, strategically, as an opportunity, not just to become better fathers, but to figure out how they got to be who they are.
Yeah. Yeah, I like the idea of coaching instead of therapy,
Mm-hmm.
because I think, yeah, I think I believe that a lot of people are turned off, a lot, maybe particularly men, when they hear the word therapy, and especially because it still has that almost the negative connotation that is there's something wrong with me. But if we were to look at it more, and what I like about you saying this now is, for those listening, therapy is really more of the therapist functions more as a coach, because the therapist cannot do anything for you that you don't want, that you're not asking for. So that's what I like about coaching, and this idea that all I would be doing, all that a therapist would be doing, is whatever you want. So I'm just helping you,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah,
Yeah,
achieve your goals.
right. I'm on the sidelines.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
on the sidelines, and the way that I offer you help is by taking myself out of the position of being central. Because a lot of times therapists had made themselves so central that people were not dealing with their relationships as much outside the therapy. They were trying to work it all out with the therapist.
yeah,
That's the old model of psychotherapy or psychoanalysis. And I haven't found it to be that helpful to people who are in it. This is more saying, let's see how you can work on your own life, on your own relationships. I'll be here for you.
yeah,
I'll give you some ideas around this, but it's your work. So
right.
I find that's a good model. I use it as a parent. I've used that. I've gotten out of the way at times when I got too involved with my daughters in the sense of being the advice giver. I
Yeah.
learned that it was much more helpful to them to be less helpful, to be there, to say something like, I don't know, I don't know how you're going to handle this, but you're pretty smart. And I'm going to get out of the way, and I'm going to let you figure that one out. Frankly, I would play dumb sometimes. I just said, I just don't have the answer for you. And
Yeah,
that's very helpful to people, because sometimes we can smother people with help. It's not the most helpful thing to be helpful sometimes.
yeah. Lately, I've in the conversations that I've been having, this theme has come up several times, which is, let's just let's stop, like you said, smothering them with information.
Mhm.
Is it men that seem to be wired that way, where we're always trying to fix people's, including our children's, problems and lives?
I wouldn't say so much wired. I would say mostly conditioned or
Mm,
learned. It's a learned behavior. I mean, society sets us up to have to know a lot. Like I've seen a lot of men who feel that they have to have the answer. So let's say something's going on with the family, they would feel like, well, I have to know how to do this, like a Mr. Fix-It. And it frankly doesn't work. It sets the man up, unfortunately, father often or husband, as someone who has to be Superman or has to know all the answers. It's really a burden that men carry. Women carry certain burdens, but men also carry burdens of having to be Mr. Fix-It. And by the way, the other thing is, because I do a lot of couples counseling and marriage counseling, and that's where men also have the Mr. Fix-It idea. And so once they've stepped in and had a conversation with their partner and they feel that they sort of got it right and they fixed it, it's like then they put away the toolbox and they go, case closed. And so if their partner says, well, I still have another thing to say about it, it's like, no, we already solved that one. Sorry, I put my toolbox away.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's also, men's conditioning is also hell on intimate relationships because that toolbox, Mr. Fix-It, doesn't work in intimacy. It may work in other situations, like where you say, the job is done,
Yeah.
let's gavel this, let's end it. But not for marriages, I haven't found that.
As you were speaking, I was thinking about why um when I was I seem to remember that it maybe in my teenage years I started. Oh, I know. When I joined the workforce is when I started thinking that I needed to have answers for bosses.
Mhm.
And it became, very stressful when I didn't have an answer. And it caused me a great deal of anxiety to not know an answer to something. So that was sort of the beginning of my I need to fix things. I need to, like, somehow be ahead of the ball. But it wasn't until like my 30s that
Mhm.
I one day finally realized, I don't have all the answers, and I'm okay with it. But it took me that 30 years to realize that I didn't have to have answers.
Yeah, but think of the conditioning that went into
Oh
that,
yeah.
learning the male kind of role conditioning that said you're supposed to have the answer because, women by and large, and I don't want to overgeneralize, but women often don't feel that way. They feel that they don't know the answer. They feel more open to asking questions when they don't know something, and they're not as burdened. They might feel, unfortunately, women go to the other thing where they even know a lot and sometimes don't put themselves forward enough with answers. Men go to the other side of the spectrum and will sometimes feel that they have to give an answer, and as you said, the pressure builds around that. And there's a lot of self condemnation around, well, what's wrong with me? Aren't I supposed to have the answer? Why would you if you didn't know that? If you didn't know it, there's a reason why. So it's unfortunate that we're stuck in these gender binds.
It is, it is. And so I by the way, it was just like two weeks ago that I started a conversation with actually it was my first conversation with multiple fathers. And I started it by reading the your opening paragraph, which I want to do again because I love it so much. It's really, I fell in love with the book as soon as I read it, because I just thought, well, how interesting, one, that you wrote this in 96. um, and I've been thinking about it over the last decade, right? But not really. No, no, I'm giving myself too much credit. Uh, Sort of. Maybe like over the last 5 years, I've been thinking exactly what you wrote here, which is, and I'm going to read it. I
Mhm.
want to I want to read this whole thing. It says under in the introduction, our society is in a state of crisis. Not only do we feel concerns about the economy, the environment, and education, but social problems abound. Homelessness, drug and alcohol abuse, teenage pregnancy, teenage suicide, divorce, and domestic violence are found throughout America and many other countries. Most of these social ills are being treated by trained personnel working for government and private agencies without much success. And so I think this is because we have not sufficiently attacked the underlying cause, which I believe is the absence of the father in many homes. And yeah, I love it. It's like, yes,
Mhm.
absolutely, totally. What I want to add to this right away is it it the our society would be, well, in so much healthier if there were more of us at home, right? I mean, that's what you're saying. It would be the opposite, right? It's just it would just, so much would change if we could be at home with our children.
Yes, I mean, and that goes into the, as long as we're having marriages, as long as we're having men and women living together, or even other partnerships that might be gay marriages or others. But if a partner is absent, and very often it is the male, because the male role has been so much around breadwinning, if that person is not available, then the loss or the lack of that person, that presence, begins to have a meaning for a child, both daughters and sons, different for each and sometimes. But the loss of it is hard you can't show it or prove it, but you know it to be true. There's not going to be a scientific survey that's going to say, or a scientific study that's going to show it exactly the way it is. But I've interviewed so many people around father loss that it has a profound effect on development, on beliefs about the self. Because, you know, a child has no way of really figuring things out. They usually put it into a certain way of viewing the world, which is the child's worldview, which includes the idea if something's wrong, it must have to do with me. The child is too egocentric to look at the world in another way. Maybe later in life they'll be able to figure it out and say, well, he wasn't around. That didn't have anything to me. But it's very hard for a child not to take that personally, or not to feel it as there's something wrong. And the reason children often put it in terms of themselves is that it would be much worse for them not to. There was to feel that something out there was so wrong. So they personalize it to have some control. It's like the illusion of control, that they can say, well, it must be because of me. So dad is not around. What's wrong with me? Maybe there's something I'm not getting right. Maybe there's something about me that makes it so that he doesn't want to be around as much. See, there's no way of rationalizing that. So the idea of the loss, the missing father, the missing parent, um, children, they might get by it, but they don't really get over it, because there's no way to explain it emotionally to a child. Child just has needs. They want to matter. They want to feel important to the people who have brought them into the world. And there's no way around that. And I think what's happened over the generations is that men in the breadwinner role felt that they were doing what they were expected to do. They were giving to their family, and they felt good about their role. What they didn't know was that they were also depriving, if they had to commute away from the house, which after the Industrial Revolution, that's what happened. It was no longer a farm type of community or a guild where you were just doing a skill. That was a different type of society, and that actually was better. There was an economy right around the household. But once that changed, and men particularly started commuting away from the home, children and wives and others felt the loss. And it
Right.
was hard to put into words, because society would say you were doing the right thing. I mean, the man was feeling good about his role. It's just that the loss emotionally could not be calculated, could not be shown. But we knew that when I interviewed many different men from all different backgrounds, they all experienced one form or another of that. And that was particularly in the generation that I was dealing with. I've had men tell me that in generations that have come later, that they had a better father and go on. But in the generations, at least that I was talking about, going back into World War II and the 50s and 60s, it was pretty much that
Mm.
fathers didn't even seem to play into the children's lives until they got a little bit older.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, it wasn't even expected. Fathers were not diapering babies. That was women's work.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the involvement came later, and unfortunately, sometimes not at all. Or you know, men
Yeah.
men, men were workers.
Yeah, I wonder if we can expand on that part about um, children blaming themselves. It's so important for anyone listening to this to understand, to recognize, to accept that children blame themselves when the father is absent.
Yes, they carry with them a certain amount of shame, the sense of what's wrong with me. There must be something wrong with me. Otherwise, something different would be occurring. Yeah, it's a very sad kind of loss. And I've had women have said it and men. So it's not just sons. Um, like a search for a missing father or a lost male figure in their life is profound. It just goes on and on. And the women that have spoken about it have said that they often found themselves, when they started getting into relationships, searching for that, searching for someone who would approve of them in the way a father would. So the idea of the approval of a male figure. Now, if you had that earlier in life, you probably wouldn't be searching for it. It wouldn't be such an empty well where you'd be looking for it. You would know that you were appreciated and mattered and were loved by this figure. You can go out into the world feeling secure in that. So
Yeah.
the thing about insecure attachments and all these things that have come up in psychotherapy, well, some of that insecurity is about the roles that men and women have been taught to play.
Yeah. Yeah, that part about the children blaming themselves just really breaks my heart
Yeah.
because I mean, the dad is already absent, and now the child is blaming themselves over something that is impossibly, it's not theirs. It's not for them to carry, but it's just. And then the worst part is, as I was thinking
Mhm.
forward in the child's life, is the when the father does come in, the child, rather than opening up his arms or her arms and embracing the father, the child may pull back as a test. Will you, will, if I do this particular behavior, which you're not going to like, will you still be there? And
Yeah.
but the adult is not going to understand what is happening and think, oh, this child doesn't really want me, I'm not going to come back. But it's
Well,
just
that's why
so.
I
Yeah.
say that, because some of the studies and anecdotes and things that came out of World War II, when the soldiers came back from Europe, it was a very, very tenuous and difficult homecoming for precisely that reason. The soldiers who came back, who had children who were very young, they might have been a year old, or just the wife might have been pregnant. And then when they came back 4 or 5 years later, um, the fathers did not know how to relate to the children. They often felt that the child felt like an intruder or someone that was getting in the way of the homecoming and were clinging to the mother. So there was such a complicated thing, and it was just so sad. Everyone envisioned a great homecoming for the soldier, and it so often didn't turn out that way.
Mm.
So yes, the child felt the loss. The father felt outside of things because the mother had established a very close relationship with the child, and the mother mostly wanted the father and the child to get along and to be there together, and that wasn't happening very quickly.
Mm.
But it's a very sad homecoming, and
Yeah.
especially since the men were often traumatized themselves from the war.
Yeah.
So, we have these visions and these wishes. How will it turn out? Oh, it'll be wonderful when he comes home.
Yeah.
Well, not necessarily,
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
You made me think of Trauma and Recovery by Judith Herman. I'm sure you've read it.
well, I've heard, yes, I mean, I've
Yeah.
heard of it. I
Yeah.
know I've read so many books on trauma. I feel like I work a lot in trauma now,
Yeah.
and that's become a lot of what the field is about.
Um, when
It certainly connects with so much of what we were just talking about, father loss.
yeah, when you were talking about the men coming back and having to fight. I feel I thought of my own fatherhood. There was a period in so my children are 12 and 13 now, but there was definitely a time when I felt like my boys had such a much better relationship with their mother that I actually had to work I felt like I had to work extra hard to catch up or to be more.
Yes, yes, no, definitely. In the family triangles that go along, fathers are often on the outside, and they wonder how they got there. But I think actually it happens in part early on. I mean, certainly there's a biological connection with, a mother and a child. And the classical idea is that the father is comes in some way, and at 2 and 3, they're actually drawing the child out of that little symbiotic little, you know, uh, love love fest that's going on between mother and child. But they also offer the idea of the outside world, where a larger, expanding world, and the father, is there and that way. Um, but it's unfortunate because it doesn't always play out that way. Again, it's something that ideally we should be there. We're not always there as much as mothers are, so that we often end up being the second parent. So interesting, because the idea of the second parent was actually the working title for the book for a while.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, second parent, because the question was, well, why are fathers in such a secondary position, and why are mothers so critical and so important in the family? And as it turns out, beyond the biological beginnings and nursing and all the other things, it's that fathers are not expected, because of all the history and that goes with it, to be the primary parent.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
unusual when they are. There are many situations where fathers are the primary parent, but you can see the way society had reacted. It's changing now, but had reacted when a man was taking care of the children or in the playground. Often the response of women who often wanted the men to be present that way, but women who didn't know them would say, "Isn't that cute?" or "Isn't
Yeah.
that sweet?" But if you think about that, that also reinforces the whole idea of that you are a secondary person, that your expectations are not that you're a primary parent. You're cute because you're not even thought of as primary. You're just
Yeah.
an adjunct. And that's, I think, what you're saying about fighting your way into the important roles, because women will often say they welcome that. But remember, we've got hundreds of years and more of being on the outside,
Yeah.
which conditions us and even women to not really sometimes take their husbands seriously around it, because they'll say, well, you weren't even around for this, or you haven't been there that much, or I know better how to put them to sleep, or I know what to do here. You're not really that involved. So there's so many situations which men are on the outside
Yeah.
and have to sort of so-called fight their way back in,
Yeah. Yeah.
or actually have good conversations with a partner that would explain and elicit the idea of, like, I want to be a part of this. I don't want it to be a one up, one down thing. I want us both to be somewhat equal. How can we do that?
Right. Yeah. Even though
Mhm.
I've been here the entire time. I have never left. I have always been here.
Yeah.
I do feel like a secondary parent. I don't feel, but and I've had to fight. Because I this is a story I've told before, but I think that I think that my wife will, so she'll micromanage the things that I do, right? The things that are clearly mine, that they're my domain. I'll give you an example. I was I had decided to show one of my boys how to use the leaf blower one fall, and so him and I, we were out there, and I'm showing him, and she, a person that knows nothing about, she doesn't know how a leaf blower, what it even is. She comes out, and she starts telling my son what to do, and I'm like, what? Like, no, I'm doing this. This is definitely my domain. You should go back inside, right? And I know she did it with good intent. I mean, it was love. She wanted to I don't know. I guess she's the primary parent, so she must. I guess she felt that she needed to be there because she's right? She considers herself
Yeah,
as a primary partner.
I think that's the discussion that often needs to be had, is like, how did someone become secondary? Or, because, in couples work, I mean, if I'm working with a couple, when anyone says to me, I became secondary, or I became one down here, I became, sort of less than, or however it was, I'll often flip that around and say, well, how did you allow that to happen? Or how did you allow that to get set up?
Yeah.
Because see, anything that's happened, in the history of the relationship and the marriage, it took two to tango. It's always two people had to participate. So what I often say is, how did you contribute to the system so that it turned out to be out of balance like this?
Yeah.
It takes blame out of it, and it puts it in the realm of, gee, we must have both conspired to create this type of relationship. And so it opens up the discussion of, we got here somehow, no blame, we'll take blame out of it, we'll just move on from here. How can we create
Yeah.
a better participation? Because anytime I felt on the outside, it's easy to get in the victim role of like, well, it's pushing me out.
Yeah.
But then again, if she's been pushing me out for a while, how did I allow that to happen without really giving it more of a discussion that got me back on the inside? So I know it just seems like these things happen, but and again, in the study of families, or you look at a marriage and the timeline, like how it got from point A to point D, or whatever it is, we all must have played a part in that.
Yeah.
And it's hard to see it while it's happening.
And I'm glad that you say it. I'm glad, because as I was thinking about it as you're asking the question.
Yeah.
And I think that it's fair to say that at that time, I was work. It was work. I would leave before they woke up, and I got home, probably right at bedtime or later for several years, right? And around the time of the issue with the leaf blower, it was like, I had just spent the last 5+ years not being as present, so that meant if I was out of the house for as long as I was, who was taking care of the children? My wife, right? So she was doing everything, right?
Yeah.
She was the primary parent.
Yeah, no, so her jumping in and taking charge could, could make sense under those conditions. Excuse me.
Yeah.
So, yeah. 1 second. Yeah, so you could then readjust her expectations by actually respecting and honoring that she did the primary caretaking, but that you realize that she has her own system of doing things. And I had to respect that too. I was out a lot. I was doing a lot of therapy at night. I did a lot of work during the day. And so when I came around, it didn't seem fair if I kind of got in there and started saying either something that might be critical or something that might interchange, because she's been on the front lines all day. So I do have to approach that with a certain amount of, gee, this has been your job pretty much, and I'm just coming in here. It's very hard to establish a more viable parenthood, fatherhood in our cases, when the time things are off. And as if you're not spending time, is what you give time to is what you love. And that's why the children often don't feel the sense of love, because if you really love me, they're saying, well, they don't care about the work that you're doing. I mean, they're not making the connection between work and, and sustaining the family financially. They're thinking of, well, if you loved me, you'd spend time, and time is the medium through which love is expressed. So you can't get around that. There's no way of finessing that. Men just have to figure out a way of making that time work. I've worked with families and couples of very, very high-powered people who are in corporate positions very high up. And when they came into couple session, it often got said where the wife was at kind of at her last straw phase, where she just said, you know, we signed on for having children. We have 3 children now, and you're just not here. And he would say something like, well, I want to become the partner in this law firm, or I want to become a higher up at IBM or whatever the firm was at the time.
Mm.
And it was an honest thing. She said, well, then that's not what you signed up for. If you wanted to become that and you want to give 80 hours a week to become partner in the law firm, then you can do that if you're single. But if you're in a marriage and if you decided to have a family, that's not going to work. You're not going to do that at this time
Yeah.
because it's not going to work in the marriage or in your parenting. So that's the unfortunate deal that people think they're getting into. Husband
Yeah.
will think, well, I'll just be this, but that's not true anymore. That was true if you go back to before 1950, men were only expected to be breadwinners, and that was about as far as it was expected to go, as far as the parenting thing. I mean, they
Mm.
came in sometimes when the kids were in adolescence and they were there in certain ways, but women were completely the ones in charge of that. And
Yeah.
we saw what that brought. So when women said, I want an equal partner and a co-parent, that was actually very progressive and positive. It just didn't feel that way for many men at the time because they weren't used to being outside the role of breadwinner.
Yeah.
I've worked with the police department in New York. I was a counselor, and a lot of these men were working triple shifts, and they were workaholics. They actually were addicted to work, and their wives were just dying to have them come home. But I don't think that it was much different than other types of addiction. I
Mm.
mean, it had the same qualities to it. And unfortunately, the family was kind of starving for lack of him home. And I would say, maybe he wasn't an alcoholic at that point, but there was addiction in the behavior.
Yeah.
So, I saw that
Yeah.
a lot.
It's interesting. Fast forward to COVID.
Mhm.
fast, fast forward to COVID, and
Mhm.
I tell you, I know that a lot of people have suffered. A lot of people have suffered loss. Um, it's been terrible for many, many, many Americans and worldwide. But what it has, in my case, and for a lot of people that I know, it has given us this a new uh, it has shown us uh, an alternative to work and life, to work and family. In my case, my wife was able to transition to working from home. I've been able to do, I can actually do all of my work from home as well. And
Mhm.
and to be home with the family has been, such a blessing, as unfortunately it came at such a great expense, right? But but what's interesting is, if we can make it happen now, we could have made it happen before, and we can continue to make it happen, post COVID, you know, right?
Yeah.
It's such a great opportunity to show, to to have a new fatherhood come into the world, where men are working from home and with their families.
Yes, yes. I mean, it is actually happening in certain white collar jobs. At least have the opportunity to do that. Not every There's a lot of class differences there, where someone's a frontline worker and they have to deliver something. They don't have that opportunity. But certainly in the white collar areas, a lot of businesses have decided, we don't even need those face to face meetings. We're doing it online. We're doing it on Zoom. We don't even need the real estate that we used to have as far as office space. So the things are changing around that. And I think it is good that certain men are getting to pop their heads in, even if they're working at home, they're getting to be around. And we get back to that economy where men were present, they were around, they were involved in everything that was going on in the family because they were in proximity to that. So if we get back to some of that, that can be a really positive thing, and some way that men and women can also appreciate each other's labor. Because
Mm,
that's another thing that comes out of this, where if men are out working in some job and women are at home doing primarily housework, which doesn't always happen now. I realize that there are, of course, so many two-career families and other things going on. But if we get to a thing where people can appreciate each other's contribution to the family, then we're in a different ball game entirely. Because a lot of that other stuff is just alienation, where somebody is not appreciating the other person's thing. They come home, as I did also. I mean, I was appreciating it, but I came home after so many hours and so many, sometimes a day where I was away. I slept over at an office, sometimes because of certain needs. And then I can't just appear and be appreciated for what
mhm.
I've just done, because my wife and I are not understanding exactly where we're each coming from at that moment. I'm tired from this, but she's also tired and wants to just hand off to me.
Yeah.
I'm saying, well, I want to transition. Well, too bad, because you were just with a lot of adults, but I was with the kids. So the idea that there's a certain sense of alienation there where people are not understanding each other's position or plight lends to the idea that families even get, by economy, families get disrupted and lose their vibrancy.
Mm,
The partners lose their vibrancy because they don't have enough time.
yeah.
And then there isn't the ideal time with each parent being with a child, sometimes in the home, sometimes out of the home. Each, the family having time together in the home and sometimes going out. The parents having alone time in the home and then sometimes away from the home if there's adequate childcare.
Right.
See, these are the ideal situations where people thrive because many of their needs are being met.
Yeah.
But the regular pressure cooker where families at a certain phase of family life are at, there
Yeah.
just isn't enough time, energy, or money around for most families to feel satisfied that the needs are being met, the interpersonal needs. And it's not about going out to some great place or some Disney World. Sometimes it's just having a pizza together on a Friday night and playing checkers or playing a board game or something
Right.
electronic even. And that's what children often say they want. It's all they want, but they don't often get that.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's look at your book.
Mhm.
I want because I want to I want to tell those watching this video that you came up with 6 types of fathers for whom these coaching techniques have proven greatly effective, and I guess I just want to list the 6, and
Mhm.
then you can talk about them if if you'd like. Number 1 is the father who is the outsider in his family. Number
Mhm.
2 is the father who becomes too angry. That was me. Number
Mhm.
3, the socially isolated father. Uh, Number 4, the father who underfunctions in the home. Number 5, the father who has difficulty taking a position. And number 6, the estranged father. I mean, I love that you identify types,
Mhm.
right? And I they're easy to understand. The 6 types are like I kept recognizing, in friends and family, my own family. They're easy to see in different parts in our town, right? And different within our community. Look, we're within our just family, extended family. All you can see all 6.
Yeah, yeah. And looking at it now from the perspective that I have now, I see there's a lot of overlap there. You know, someone that can't take a position, that's not able to do that very well, well, they're usually angry because they're not very clear about where they stand on things. It's not always a virtue just to say anything you want, dear. You know, it's not the greatest thing to have. So, yeah, the underfunctioning, the not taking a position, and then being angry. There's a lot of overlap there, and um, I think a lot of it goes into how do boys become men? What do they learn in their growing up process? And I think it's changing, but I still think it's taking a long time for boys to be educated as what it means to be relational. You know, when I've worked with girls and boys of the same age, and there's a gap. Maybe some of it is because of certain biological things, but it can't all be that. Um, Boys' language around intimacy, which has to do with feelings, they usually don't learn that. If I have a session, I used to be in a middle school and like a counselor, girls were so much more advanced as far as being able to articulate what it was they were thinking and feeling. So you get into the education of boys, that's where the problem begins. There's a gap,
Mm.
and that gap extends into those first marriages, which often don't work out. The divorces are often because of men's lack of skill in managing relationships. As girls are way ahead, and there are many reasons for that. But I would say that men have a lot of catching up to do. If you wanted to look at it historically, I would say that if you looked at the last 50 or 60 years even, women have changed a great deal in their attitudes around all this, men not so much.
Mm.
And that gap continues to be prevalent. I can see it in couples work that I do. You know, I've done a lot of couples work, and it's an unfortunate gap. So you could say men's inability at times to express nuance in emotions. Like, for instance, a man might say he's angry. That's
Hmm.
one emotion that men are pretty quick to say what they're feeling. But when you start getting into the things about what would allow you to have a conversation about your feelings to either to your children, which you're trying to model and teach, or to your partner, you need a lot more language, even language like, I wasn't just angry, I was disappointed. I felt hurt when that happened.
Yeah.
I was lonely the other day when this happened. I mean,
Yeah.
7 or 8 emotions that men are often not even comfortable saying because it shows vulnerability.
Hmm.
And then when they can't do that, they're kind of hamstrung. When it comes to an emotional situation, an argument, they go right to anger. So not having that skill and that breadth of, you know, bigger menu, let's say,
Yeah.
of emotions and words and language is really, it's really an unfortunate lack in establishing a stronger relationship with a partner. So if a woman can then say a number of things how she feels and say it very clearly, um, and you can't say anything except I'm hungry.
I'm hungry and angry.
I'm really angry. You know, that was the joke about men was that, you know, what are the 3 emotions? I just said maybe 3 or 4: hungry, angry, horny, and tired.
That's it.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
So all the nuance of, like, you know, oh, I felt, you know, hurt and disappointed the other day.
Yeah.
Um, you know, the words, the language is so important in this because it allows you to communicate and create a bridge between you and your partner
Yeah.
in a way that you could say, oh, I see what you're saying there. Are you really understanding? You're getting me. You're getting what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
And I think men feel limited in that way and then get annoyed at themselves and feel frustrated and ashamed that they can't really keep up with what's being asked as far as emotionally explain what you're going through. You know, a lot of the cops that I worked with would come home and when I finally got their partners in, often women who, you know, really wanted to have a closer relationship, um, they would say that their husbands, when they came, or their boyfriends, when they came home, they would want to know what happened during the day. but not because they just wanted to know the incident. Like, let's say there'd be, well, the police officer would just say, well, what would you want to know this? I just, so I brought in another perpetrator, or I did this. You wouldn't even want to know that. But what she was starving for and hungry for was wanting to know what the experience was like for him. Like, was it frightening for you at times? What was it monotonous? Did it do this? Did it do that? So the idea that the husband or the partner was thinking very concretely, like, I wouldn't, why would you want to know that? And she's thinking more, I want to know you. You know what
Yeah,
I mean?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
I want
yeah,
to know
yeah.
more about who you are.
Yeah.
And so that language gap is significant. And I
Yeah.
think that's where a lot of things fall apart in relationships, because what's going to bridge the gaps and some of the irritations and the frustrations of living together, it's going to be having a really intimate conversation.
Yeah,
And
I like that. I like the what's the experience. I think that if I could, if maybe we could help some guys communicate with their wives, it might be around can you share. Yeah, it doesn't matter what you do, right? It's you're a cop, you're bringing, like you said, you're bringing in another perpetrator. That's or maybe if you're in construction, you built another house. If you're doing, if you're building bathrooms, you built another bathroom. So if when the wife says, how was your day? It's not, I built another bathroom. What do you want? Right?
yeah, yeah,
But instead, dig in and think, well, what was my experience, right? But maybe is it difficult that is it as I try to put myself in that situation where, like let's say, I'm a guy who builds bathrooms.
right.
I also like I from me Ricardo, I look at at that experience and I go, I didn't feel a lot while I was building it. I
Right.
wasn't thinking too much about it. I mean, I measured. Maybe hold on, let me see. There's got to be a way that I can. Let's see. I started the morning. I had to measure, and I laid down some tile. How did I feel? I don't know. It's like, how do I turn? How do I turn? Right? How do I do this,
Yeah.
Lou?
I think the way that it turns into something, first of all, contractors often are dealing with the public. They're actually dealing with people. Each time they enter into a contract or they're doing that, there is an interactive part with that. You're meeting with a new client, and that in itself is interesting because the public is always different and interesting as you're talking to them. They want special things, they have a certain quality. Like if I would describe the nuance of going into the house, this house, it was maybe a very wealthy house, and this is what I saw,
Yeah.
and this was the conversation I had with the people. They wanted this, they wanted that. It was hard to come to terms with them because I could tell they were a certain type of person who was
Right.
going to want this, and I got a little bit nervous there. I felt like I came across as a little bit annoyed. I didn't mean to do that. Um, then when I started working, later I had to check back in. See, it's the interpersonal that's
Yeah.
interesting.
Okay.
The job itself does have a lot of repetition, but almost anyone that has interactions with other people can talk about their day because
Yeah.
people are interesting. I mean, if I'm doing this therapy for over 40 years and I know the patterns that people present, but they're presenting it in slightly different ways. I mean, I've seen the same family patterns and couple patterns. People say, wow, you must be a genius. Look how you got that. I said, no, I'm not a genius. This is because I've seen this pattern over and over and over again, but people present differently because
Yeah.
they're unique in their personality style and how they present it.
Yeah.
So it's refreshing in many ways to see it. And that's what we get. Like police officers, they were spending a lot of the time often in a patrol car with a partner, and they were probably more intimate in the sense of talking about
Yeah.
stuff with their fellow cops than they
Yeah.
were with their wives. So it's not like they didn't talk about stuff. It's
Right.
just that they weren't used to doing that with women. They needed more language and a better understanding of what their wives and partners wanted,
Yeah.
to get to know them. Intimacy, to see into me, to get to know them.
And that's what I was gonna say. Men who are interested in improving their vocabulary so that they can express their experiences better can ask their partners, right?
Yeah.
Their partners. Yeah. I remember, and I'll give you an example. I remember one day my wife said that I wasn't being romantic enough.
Hmm.
So rather than take it personally and become angry, that one that one classic
Yes.
emotion, I said, I said, wow, I didn't know this. I didn't realize that I wasn't doing enough. Can you tell me what to do? Right? Like genuinely, I was like, I don't know what have I been missing? Tell me what to do. And she said, she listed, however many things, and that's what I did. Problem solved, you know. And
Yeah.
but then, I my the color palette, the my experience improved
Yes.
because I embraced these new items, right? That I obviously, and of course, their relationship got better, family got better.
Yes. And you know what's so interesting about that is that it goes along with the whole idea of the family of origin work, which is to go back and approach the family as an area of inquiry,
Mm-hmm.
study. Now, men and women often come from different, they have different gender backgrounds, they have different perceptions, and they also need to approach it as you were doing, not defensively, but from the idea of inquiry. So let me
Yeah.
understand you better. Let me understand what you're asking for. What does that word mean to you?
Right.
Language, again.
You have that. That's in your book. I was just looking for it. I have it highlighted somewhere. We're gonna get to it.
Yes.
Just say that again. Approach it from.
Well, I'm saying that the idea of inquiry,
Yeah.
we do that when we study in school, the idea we have a research project, or we look up, like if I was going to visit another culture, let's say it was the people of Mozambique, and I wanted to know more about them, I would not go in there and just assume that I knew what what certain words, even if I knew the language a little, I wouldn't know what the meaning of that was to them. I might do a certain shake of the head, which meant something very negative. So I'd want to study a little bit about that culture before going in, or I might want to ask questions
Yeah.
along the way. Now, that's what we need to approach a partner with too, with the spirit of inquiry, like not defensively, but let me understand that better. So you you didn't feel I came across this way. You felt I came across as unromantic. What does that mean? Because I didn't even know that I was doing that. See, if we approach things with that spirit, relationships would improve just by the nature of inquiry. We'd often approach it defensively because we often feel we're not getting something right, and therefore we're being, attacked or
Yeah.
questioned on some other level. And that's a very male thing too, to go into a shame spiral rather than go into a spirit of let me understand this better.
I wonder if we get ourselves in trouble when we look at our partners and we think they're so similar to us. They appear to be just like us, maybe different sex, right? But I think that that's such a great mistake. Maybe that's part of what's wrong within our society, or in general the global society, which is that we think that women are just like men and men are or like we might be assuming that the similarities are greater than the opposite, than the differences.
The differences, yeah,
But I
yeah.
think but we're saying that the differences are much much greater than we can imagine, and that's why our relationships aren't working.
Well, that's a big part of it. And the interesting thing is, I mean, any couple's work often comes down to the notion, the word different is the key, which is interesting because the book itself and the whole theory, the word differentiation of self, which means you're actually defining yourself as different as well as a part of a family or a group. So
Mm.
the idea, the word different is the key to growth. I would say human growth is based on the idea of differentiation, even cross-culturally, that even within a tribal culture that seems to have simple rituals, that within that somebody still differentiates. They still say, well, this is the type of bowman that I want to be. This is the type of, it's a universal principle. And so when I'm working with a couple, it's interesting because I'm working with a couple now who's an older couple. They just got together and actually are living together. And I said, from the beginning of the therapy, I said, the word difference is going to be the key to our work together, because each of you are going to be looking at how the other person operates and what they do in living together. And you're going to be scratching your head saying, what's going on here? That looks crazy to me, or that's not the way I do it. So the key to growth is the idea of respecting and understanding differences. I see that you do it differently than me. Not that it's wrong, not that it's bad. It's not one up or one down. It's just different. Now, if we could just get to the idea of difference and just respect it as what it is, there's a tremendous amount of growth in there of just holding on to your own idea. I see it differently. You're not wrong. And so that's the key to human development. We're always a part of a family, sometimes a couple, sometimes a group, a tribe, a corporation, some other entity. But the idea that there's a force towards togetherness, which says, be like me, or just be like us, or be like the family porridge. And there's a force towards being different, which we have to continue to exert throughout life, because otherwise we just get enmeshed in these relationships. So the negotiation that's going on between couples is the same thing that's going on in other parts of life. It's saying, I'm part of this relationship, but I'm different. And
Right.
your ability to tell your wife, well, I see what you're doing as different, that's respecting that boundary, but also the idea that difference is the key to growth. We can hold two ideas in our head. One is that I have my own opinion, but you also have one, and it's interesting to me. It's not
Yeah.
a threat. It's not something that I have to, get rid of in you. It's just different. And with this couple that I work with, it keeps coming back to that,
Yeah.
oh, I say, you seem like annoyed with her, but what you're annoyed about is that she's just doing it differently. Do you think your way is always better?
Yeah. Yeah.
So we tend to do that. We say, well,
Yeah.
I can't believe he's doing it that way or she's doing it that way. Why can't you believe it? It's just different. You can take a position and say, I see it differently. That's fine. But once we get into this thing where we know that that's wrong and we have a very clear idea, then we're stuck again. And that's what we get. So the concept of differentiation, which is the Bowenian stuff, is the key to so much of our growth and to get out of the stuckness in relationships.
I remember my relationships improved immensely the day in my I might have I think I was in my I'd like to say that I was in my 20s when I
Mm.
realized that I realized, one, that I was getting upset because things were not being done my way.
Yeah.
Thinking back on it, I feel ridiculous, but that's how I was. And you're saying that, well, it appears that there's a lot of us who are saying it has to be done my way. But then that one day I was able to recognize that as long as it was done, as long as the task was completed, it didn't matter how she did it or how anyone else did it. It doesn't matter how anyone does anything. It doesn't have to be done my way. It's the task complete. And in a relationship, it was so useful. It's so useful. Did it get done? Yes. How it got done, who cares? I don't care. Nobody cares. As long as it got done.
Mhm.
And if a man, or in this case father, if a father can get to that point where they can allow their wives to just do it their way and be okay with it, then that should translate also to their children. It should also, you know, these fathers might also be able to say to their children, and this is important because we struggle with kids when we ask them to take out the trash or take out the recyclables, things like that, right? And we have these expectations of how these things need to be done, right? Or how the cardboard needs to be put together in whatever way. But if we just let it go, our, you know, the relationships wouldn't suffer so much if we could just say, just get it done. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I mean, certainly you can give them guidance about it, but their ability to figure out their own way of doing it is very helpful to them. And it's a sign of respecting their independence and their differences in itself. Now, the family will always struggle with that because families over generations do have ways of doing things. And when a child is going to leave home, let's say that in most cultures, and certainly in American culture generally, there's a differentiation struggle there. There's the idea of how are you going to leave home? Sometimes the family has an idea of how this is supposed to be done. Sometimes we have that classic thing where somebody says, well, all the men in this family have become lawyers. And somebody else is saying, well, I want to be a dancer or something, you know? And I think that struggle around I'm different is the key to kind of our growth and even the growth of others around us. Because when we say we're different, it puts the system into a little bit of turmoil, sometimes a lot. So when you're saying you're different, gee, I don't want to, I'm not following the family rule, the family will sometimes go into a conniption at that point. They'll become very upset. They'll say, what do you mean? Everybody does this way. You want to be disinherited? You want to get, you know, cut out of the family will? You do it our way. If the person holds their ground in a meaningful way, very often the system matures, which means people rise up to accept the difference. And it's a change for everybody. Everybody grows from that person's willingness to be a leader within themselves, to, you know, to exert a certain amount of leadership for themselves. And people look up to that and they actually learn that, we can be different too. So this concept of different is so profound and it covers so many bases because we're always dealing with it. We're never going to be we're never going to be in life where we're not confronted with the
Yeah.
notion of, do I want it that way or do I want to do it slightly differently? We're always being challenged that way. Marriages are being challenged, jobs, careers. So that's a never ending thing. The family will always tug at you to say, well, this is the way we do it.
Yeah.
You
But
might be saying, well, no, actually, I want to do it slightly differently.
and I have a what I like about this in so a number of years ago
Mm-hmm.
I started thinking that the best way for my family to grow, the
Mm-hmm.
the healthiest way in which it could grow is if everyone within the family understood that they had to lead um with their strengths, right? And that's such a great way of encouraging individuality, right? Like just if we allow each other to lead with our strengths, everyone within the family will have to be different than the other because we all have different strengths.
Yes.
Everyone within every family is different, right? So for instance, I'm in a situation now where my wife does certain things that I'm not as good at, and I'll do others that she is not. And with our children, this one does this one particular thing really well, so that when we're together, we know who to go to, right? It's like the oldest one is okay, buddy, go do that because that's you, right? Oh, and then and then everyone is, and there isn't one single person trying to lead everybody into being who they're not.
Yes. Yes. No, I can see that. What you've done is you've challenged the old way of doing things, which was the patriarchy, which had a hierarchy where one male was at the top and everyone had to fall into line around that. And I think what you've done is you've opened that up to examine individual, as you said, individual strengths and differences, And once you've done that, it's kind of like the difference between a totalitarian state and a democracy. Democracy has a certain amount of discussion. It's not always one person, one vote, but sometimes it comes out to the idea that people who have certain strengths and capacities get to do certain things because they do it well. So there's a lot of opening there from
Yeah.
generations that came before.
Right. Yeah.
And by the way, that's the other thing about generational growth. The more we know about what's coming down the pike at us, what had come down from the past, like I had a lot of angry fathers and men in the family. So just knowing that and understanding the patterns allowed me to, what somebody once called, face the flames of the last generations, looking at that and not have to repeat them. See, if I'm willing to face those flames, which I did by writing this book and taking a closer look at manhood issues and my own anger in many different situations, I was able to not pass that along to the next generation. So they didn't have to carry my shame. They don't have to carry my anger because I've already done that work. Now, somebody that isn't that aware of that and hasn't had the opportunity or the inclination to take a look at the generations that come before, we have a tendency to pass it on as a pattern right the way it is. It's uncanny how exactly it can be passed along.
Yeah.
So your awareness, as you've seen what happened in the past, my awareness of looking what was coming down at me, because we don't get to decide that. I mean, that was just the hand I was dealt.
Yeah.
But I got to play it a certain way, which gave me certain opportunities and opened up some doors. So I didn't have to repeat it exactly the way my father did that to me. Gave me some leeway, some opportunity. Not everyone had that. I mean, if you go back a generation or two, nobody was looking at it that way.
No.
Just pass it along.
Yeah. 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 No. I'm blessed to have caught myself. I mean, when I think about my anger early on in their lives, but I got rid of it. I'm done with it. It's not happening anymore. So I'm certainly hoping that whatever damage I did to them, to my boys, is minimal, and they'll be able to do much better than I did. I mean, I'm
Well,
so happy.
getting at different points in their life, they're getting a different father. In other words, in this point in their development, whatever you did earlier, they're seeing change. They actually you're living out a different legacy, and that's what they're getting now. So, I mean, that's a long period of their life that you're offering them, that offers them someone who's not reactive,
Yeah. Right.
not getting angry in that way. So I think you did your work. And, it's unfortunate that work is so looked upon as just the work that we can see. But the real heroic parts of things are the things that we do, like you're describing, like where you worked on your anger enough so that you didn't pass that along in that form.
Yeah. Yeah. So here's the father laws, page 10. We're not going to do that again.
Mm-hmm.
Therapist as coach. We won't, page 25. We won't do that again. You beat me to all my notes.
Yeah.
Maybe not this one. This one. Oh, no, I have others. Maybe we can come back to this one.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this, I think this is the one. Oh yeah, page 46. Adopting the research stance. That's the title.
Yes.
Yeah. This is not to say that you should remain unemotional or detached. The goal is ultimately to be able to remain intimately involved, but uncondemning and open with all of the important people in your life.
Yeah, the research position is a significant reposition. Talk about repositioning in family. Like when you stop being angry, you were repositioning yourself in some ways too, as far as your role. The research stance itself, you see, some people have a lot of trouble, especially initially, but sometimes for life, they can't do it. They can't reflect on their feelings. They can react to other people's feelings. They can react when they feel a surge of something, but the ability to think about it. And so the research stance means I'm going to look at my family not as just the son of my father or the brother of my sister or the nephew of my uncle. I'm going to look at this as someone who would be studying something. That's a very hard thing to do because our gut tells us to react. Like, let's say I'm at a wedding and my uncle approaches me and I know what he's going to say. Oh, there comes Uncle Joey. He's going to say the same thing he always says.
Yeah.
And I'm like already like a little annoyed.
Yeah.
But the thing about it, Uncle Joey is like coming over to me and he puts his arm around me and he says, you know, son, when you go out into the world, and he might have a piece of advice. That's a very interesting thing. Rather than looking at, oh, he always says the same thing. What's the meaning of that? Because that piece of advice that he's giving me is part of the family lore. It's part of his history. It's part of what the family learned as a group. He may be telling me something about how to survive in the world. Now, my father was giving me those messages at times. I just dismissed them, but he was telling me a piece of wisdom that he got from a long history. And I was just dismissing it as, what does he know? But you see, the thing about it so interesting is that people don't say things randomly. Saying something that has a meaning for the tribe often, when I say the tribe, but the whole family. And so you can learn a lot. So the research stance would mean, instead of my saying, oh, can't believe he's saying that again, I say, I wonder what that means to him. And I might ask him a question. I say, you know, he said that to me a number of times, but where did you learn that?
Yeah.
See? Now I got a question going. He said, well, you know, when I was fighting in World War II, I learned this, and then I learned that. And now all of a sudden I got another opening where I'm finding out, oh, I didn't know you had that.
Yeah.
So the story gets bigger.
Yeah.
And the story expands. And all of a sudden I'm getting a broader vision of who my uncle is, but how he got to be who he was in his family.
Yeah.
So as a therapist, as a family of origin therapist, when I'm doing that type of work with the genogram up and talking to families, there's always another question, always more to know. And it puts pieces of the puzzle together. And sometimes people say, aha, well, I never knew that. I always thought that the reason they were angry at that time of the life and things in turmoil was because of me. But when I did the research, the family lost a business then. They went into poverty for a while. And I thought something went crazy.
Yeah.
So the research stance can be very valuable. It sort of takes you out of the center and say, it wasn't just about me. There was a lot going on that moment in family, and everyone got affected. So the more questions, when somebody said in the Bohemian model, when you're asking questions, if you run out of questions, you're the one that's stuck. There's always more questions to ask in family to broaden the picture.
You're reminding me of when you say that, you know, that uncle of yours, you know, he always says this one thing. If you could ask if you can get past the thing that he repeats and try to go and just maybe like you said, a single question might bring you back to how he arrived. And you told the story. You reminded me of Chris Gardner. I read 2 of his books. Maybe he's only written 2. He's the movie In Pursuit of Happiness that Will Smith did with his. Anyway, the Chris Gardner, basically, he had a son, and his wife left them. He kept the boy. The child was maybe 3 or so years old. And then he didn't have anything. He ended up being homeless with the child for some time. Now he became a huge financial success. But with the story, the what you made me think of was, to this day, even though he's very, very wealthy, he will hoard bags, briefcases, suitcases, like plastic bags. In fact, he can't let go of them because however many, 30 or so years ago, he was homeless. He was hoarding these, whatever he could carry his things in, right? So as I thought about your story about, the uncle, it's like, what is he hoarding and what is he sharing with you based on something fairly traumatic that might have happened to him? If you could
Yeah.
just get to, what that might be, rather than being judgmental. Oh, here he comes again. He's going to tell the same story. Yeah, he's going to tell the same story because that's as far as he got, and that was the end of the story. That was what he's not being able to convey, is everything that happened to get him to that point, right? And in part because maybe as a man, or maybe just him, doesn't have the vocabulary, right, to share the experience, which is what you said earlier.
Yes, there could be that part of it. And also that the more we know about family, fathers, let's say if as a son of a father, the more we broaden our own experience and our own possibilities. Because the narrower the narrative is, there's the story about father and who he is, the narrower our own choices are. If I'm completely cut off from father, let's say father left when he was very young, the family is, we don't know who this father is, and I don't know why he left, it's left as an abandonment story alone. In other words, it's just like, well, he left. Or a father who's in jail. How did he get there? We don't know. He's just portrayed by the family as a bad apple. Now, if you're left with that story as that's your father, then you could feel like the bad seed. That's, gee, he was that, and that's kind of who I am. Maybe I just inherited that. Maybe I'll become like that. But let's say we knew a bigger panorama, a bigger movie of his life, and all the things he did, some of them being really fine acts and things that were inventive and creative. He had a whole life. Once we know that whole life, we say, oh, gee, he hit upon some hard times, and then that happened.
Yeah.
That's a bigger story.
Yeah.
So if I've spoken to young men who had a father in prison, and they just knew he was bad, then that doesn't allow them to really think that they can exceed that. They can be better than, because it's almost like, now you can say that's my lot in life. I come from this father. Well, wait a minute. What do you know his story?
Yeah.
How did you learn his story? Is there more to that? And I think that's a very expanding idea if you can know the story, and even more than that, know the bigger family story. Who was your uncle?
Yeah.
What were the other patterns in the family? How did they survive? So many questions. And then the story that you're carrying around is a bigger story and gives you more choices in life.
Right. It changes. Yeah. Your narrative changes. Your view of everything changes then. The vocabulary must be expanded immediately. If you can, I think maybe is that a lesson? Is that a lesson to fathers that are trying to be better fathers? Maybe, but you are saying that go back and do some research on.
Take a look backward.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you don't know how you got to be where you are. Like in the anger stuff that I was saying, that before I really researched it, I had a narrow view of it. The view was what my father did to me, which is important. I mean, I could hold him accountable for the physical stuff that he went on, the anger. I mean, he certainly was accountable for that. But in the broader context, in the broader family picture that I researched, and looking at the generations and the dates that things happened, his resources were limited. There's here I come about and come of age in the 1960s. Look at the resources I had around and what was going on in psychotherapy and different things that I could get into. I was a teacher by that time. I had a middle-class salary even by the time I was in my 20s. He didn't have that opportunity. So there's that part of it. There's just a lot of parts of the history that I would have to know about these men to know how they got to be where they are. And as I said, if you go back one more generation to my grandfather, he wouldn't have even thought about some of these things.
Mm.
He would have been glad to have a day where nothing bad happened. He was able to do some carpentry,
Yeah.
got home, had a good meal, and went to bed.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't about intimacy at that time, it was about survival.
Yeah.
And so, we're only so many generations away from that. And our understanding of things grows by just saying, when did it happen?
Yeah.
And the anger part, the interesting part about the anger was that it became less personal to me about what he did to me when I found out the pattern went on from his father to him and other fathers in the family going back
Yeah.
to all the way to different parts of the world, to different countries, to different things. The pattern wasn't that different. So it's almost like saying, don't take it so personally because you're not the center of the universe. You're actually part of a very big pattern that's been going on for generations. You want to change it, that's fine, but don't make yourself so central. When I
Yeah.
do the enneagrams, I'm just this little one person in this multi-generational
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah. Yeah. No, no, I'm very well aware of the, my reality was very different than my father's.
Mhm.
I mean, I finished high school, I went to college,
Mhm.
but the other thing, there's beyond the availability of knowledge, which, books, and, for me, maybe a television when I was younger, but primarily books. Um, I'm a different person, right? I am a different person than my father. I really am. I'm inquisitive. Hyper introspective, right? I don't know if he was, but I don't, I'm gonna guess maybe he wasn't. So like you said, but then even in my, in my teens, there were books everywhere. They were available. There were bookstores, libraries. I know that my father grew up in, on a farm. I mean, there were no Barnes and Nobles around. It was get on the horse and go do.
Molly Barnes.
Thank you, Lou. I walked into that one, didn't I? That's right. There were only Barnes. There was no Nobles. Um, yeah, it was different. I mean, I started reading, very early on. I started looking for answers very early on, and it's possible that he just, he didn't, and because his life was just very different, right?
Yeah.
I think I picked up some. I wonder if I picked up some of that quick response, some of that quick anger responses, early on. Because he left in essence, like I was about 6 or 7 when he left, but by then, those are your formative years, right? Those are your such important. And I wonder, if I don't remember. I mean, I remember him being angry. I just don't remember. I think I picked up some of that from him, with my kids, until I caught myself and I said, I don't want to be this, right? But yeah, going back to the idea that, like you
Mhm.
said, 2 generations ago, forget it. There was just like, it was just no information. I mean, it just didn't. Not everyone had it. Not everyone had the time. Not everyone had the time. Like you said, leisure. I mean, to
Mhm.
could afford to sit and read.
Yes,
You know?
yes. Now, leisure is a relatively new idea for people who are workers and working class people. Uh, Only the wealthy had that opportunity
Yeah.
to think about things like being intimate and what
Eh,
that meant.
Let me see what else. Okay. All right. So this is a good one. I like this part. I wanted to get to this. How are we doing with time?
We're fine. We're fine. We've got
We're fine.
another minute or so.
All right. Just so we started like at 8-ish. So yeah. Just this is at least this one. The fear of losing our freedom.
Hmm.
I connect with this part of the book. Um, I feel like I had to make a conscious decision to, like, I felt like I needed to have been out in the world with enough women before I could settle down. I needed to know that I was not going to have any questions about it.
Mm-hmm.
So I was able to do that. I was able to make that happen. So what are your thoughts on what would you like? What do you like about this particular section?
Well, I mean, I think that the notion of freedom, if we look at it in relatively modern times, mid 20th century, the male role models were really about freedom being out on your own and not being tied down or settled down. That was a different image. Like a lot of the Westerns that grew up in the 1950s and early 60s were about men's independence, which had to do with the cowboy, kind of a John Wayne figure going back in time. Like the cowboy was really not to be tied down. That was the thing. And so he always was going off in the end
Yeah.
on his horse. His relationship was really with his horse primarily.
Yeah. He rode off into the sunset. Yeah. He left the town. Yeah. There he goes.
So he's going off again.
Yeah.
And that was the male prototype of what it was to be truly masculine, was you weren't going to be tied down to a woman. And so, you would have a romantic interlude, but it wasn't going to be. And that was true in the rock and roll of that era and everything. And men were out there.
Yeah.
And that was the definition of masculinity. So the idea of freedom was not about the freedom of being in a relationship and feeling liberated in your intimacy and your closeness to another human being.
Yeah.
Freedom was really not being tied to anything, and therefore it kind of, the thing that I look at it kind of has a very adolescent thing. It's kind of teenage, because teenage boys are not ready to be in a relationship. I mean, they're not developmentally ready to be very involved, and neither are teenage girls, but they sometimes get involved and they fall in love and they have this, but they have to maintain a certain amount of freedom to figure out who they are developmentally. They don't even know who they are. So how could they be that intimate? But that kind of carried over into adulthood for men. And so the idea of freedom, and then when women seem to be pursuing men in those ways to get them to be part of a relationship, it was always kind of pursuer and distancer, distancer. Those were the models we saw in movies. Those were what men began to internalize. So his idea of women had to catch men to get them, to get a good catch. And that's the model, I think, that men, so that's stayed until very much into the 21st century, is the idea of women saying, I don't know why he doesn't want to be. We're so happy together. We enjoy this. And there's big questions before a marriage takes place. The man seems to be, the prototype of the man fleeing or not showing up or whatever it is. And I think it's that notion of freedom as not interpersonal. This doesn't involve the idea of a freely chosen intimacy and I want to spend my life and this is wonderful. It's more like, what am I going to lose? That's the way you approach it. It's like, I'm going to lose my freedom. I'm going to lose my ability to, well, true. But why aren't you seeing the other side of it as clearly as women see it? Because we're not biologically programmed that way. That's learning. And so this notion of losing one's freedom is such a male idea. Someone once said this funny thing. There was a book, Women Who Run with the Wolves. And someone said, it wasn't my idea, but he said, men who flee with the ferrets. They flee from relationships because they're frightened of some type of loss. I certainly can't say that I haven't experienced myself. There were times that I felt like I'm going to lose something. What am I going to lose? And I couldn't quite pin what it was, but men often have that vague fear that it's loss.
Yeah.
They're going to lose something precious.
I've been saying for some time now that, and I think you touched on it, is this idea that the yeah, that the that it, the freedom, the real freedom, and the real freedom is in the commitment to your partner and your children, because of what it does to your, to the expansion of your ability to see more of the world. You're right. The real freedom is um in engaging with your family.
Yes, connection.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes. No, I know, but that hasn't been, that's been women's work
yeah.
in traditional society. So women are the connectors, and men are the ones who go out and connect. Men are instrumental in getting things done, but they're not in charge of relationships. You see, they
Mm,
don't see themselves in charge. So that the reason that women can be more differentiated even than men is because they focus more on their own selves in relationship. So they have an advantage in terms of thinking more about and figuring out, who am I? What do I want here? And they're often more advanced in that area. Maybe they don't have much of a sense of self in other ways, but certainly in having thought about what it means to be in a relationship and some of the skills that involve it, women are, again, there's a gap there. And men would have to excuse me, to close that gap, they'd have to begin to think about it and value the idea that this is important stuff that everything shows me, even the idea of longevity and health, physical health, not just emotional health, is very connected to intimacy. I'm willing to be in therapy sessions as sort of a salesman for that, because I say that this really does work. You will get something out of this
yeah.
if you're able to open up to this. Men are often frightened because they don't feel that they're good at taking positions for themselves, getting back to that area.
Mm,
You often feel that, gee, she knows how to say all these things and has all these skills, but the idea of standing up for yourself in a meaningful way is often very hard for men. They don't have the language again, they don't have the skills. So they feel like, oh, I'm being henpecked, I'm being this, I'm being that. Well, the reason is being because your skills aren't that developed. You're not at a unique disadvantage. You just haven't developed those skill sets
yeah,
that would you
yeah.
require to not be pushed around and to feel, I know what I want. Let me say what it is, and then we could have a meaningful discussion. Doesn't always get there. And for all the reasons that we said, language and uh,
Vulnerability.
vulnerability, sense of loss, sense of loss of manhood, sense of shame,
Yeah.
which all kind of clusters around a whole lot of different skills and emotional growth that men would have to get to in order to be equal, to get to a good equality.
Hmm.
Because remember, they were programmed to think that they were better than and higher than you. That's the thing of men. Patriarchy is saying you're up here, but
Right.
it doesn't feel that way when you're in a relationship and you're not able to really take a position.
No. The let's see, the price of our the price of our manhood. Let me see. Just I just want to read this little section. When I was growing up, the mystique that surrounded manhood had little to do with settling down and everything to do with being free and untamed. A real man was thought to be a free man out on his own in search of adventure. The idea of being tied down came dangerously close to being tied to a mother's apron strings.
Mm,
Oh man. Let me
yeah.
see what else I got. Let me see if I have one more. Fathers and Sexuality, Chapter 14.
Mhm.
It may seem that sex is an adult topic that should have no place in a fatherhood discussion. I like that. um, Yet in my work, I have discovered that the sexual relations between adults in a family affect what happens in the rest of the family as well. Um, I love, this is, maybe this is time, we'll have to have another conversation for this part, but sexuality in fatherhood is so important. It's such an important conversation that I think that a lot of people are not having. There's still a lot of sex is still a thing that we don't talk about, right? Even in
It's not
marriage.
taboo, but it,
Yeah.
and yet, and especially with men not being a part of a lot of those conversations. Yeah, yeah, no, I think that, and even be able to talk to children, your own children, in a way that's not embarrassed, but has the idea of, oh, this is a normal conversation. We can talk about this. We
Yeah.
can go. Yeah.
Yeah, it blows my mind that so many of the comments that I get on my on the YouTube, on the well, yeah, the comment sections, by 16, 17-year-old boys that haven't had a conversation about sex with their parents, and it's like with their, at least with their father, it's like, how are you 17? And I had a conversation with one 17-year-old. He reached out to me because he was afraid that his girlfriend was pregnant.
Mhm.
That's how they come to me. Like, she's pregnant, I don't know what to do, help me out, right? And I asked him, I said, you haven't had this conversation with your dad? And he's like, nope. And we're making, fathers are making a big mistake when they don't have these conversations with their children, and
Yeah.
it's so
Well,
natural.
yes, it's natural, but since men are not supposed to be in that whole area, touchy feely often, they're not they're not really geared to give guidance.
Is that what it is?
Well, I mean, since they don't feel, you have to be pretty comfortable yourself in order not to come across as edgy and nervous about it. Because if you're not comfortable in your own skin and what you're saying, it's going to come across that way and it's going to make everyone else nervous. So work through some of the areas around what this means, and the whole area is very important in our communication to children. So,
Yeah. Yeah.